There are moments that remind us why so many still miss Barack Obama's leadership. It started as a simple speech, but it became a lesson the Trumps would never forget. Barron Trump tried to mock Obama's words, but soon after he was silent, and what happened next became the perfect example of grace defeating arrogance. The day had arrived. One of the most anticipated events in Washington, D.C., a grand leadership forum attended by global dignitaries, politicians, and business icons. But what made this event different was who sat in the front row. 3 names that didn't just define politics, that they divided it. Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Barron Trump. Each of them represented something entirely different. Obama calm, calculated, the voice of diplomacy. Trump loud, direct, the symbol of power and confrontation. And Barron young, confident, still finding his voice, but carrying a last name that echoed through every headline in America. The hall was packed, the air buzzed with energy, reporters whispered predictions, photographers adjusted their lenses, and guests kept glancing toward the stage. Everyone knew with these 3 in one room, something was bound to happen. The stage backdrop glowed in red, white, and blue. Flags lined the room and golden lights reflected off polished floors. The host, a well-known political commentator, stepped up to the microphone and smiled nervously. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "please welcome our first speaker, former President of the United States, Barack Obama." The crowd erupted into applause. Some stood, some simply clapped quietly, but everyone leaned forward. Then from the corner of the stage. But Barack Obama walked in, tall, composed, unrushed. He didn't need to say a word. His presence did all the talking. He gave a small nod to the crowd and began to speak. "Thank you," he said. "It's good to see so many faces here, leaders, thinkers, and young people ready to shape what comes next." His tone was warm, measured, like someone having a real conversation, not giving a speech. The kind of tone that draws you in. He paused for a moment, looked around, and continued. "I want to talk about something simple, something we all feel, even if we don't always say it. The cost of living, the price of groceries, rent, gas, it's affecting millions of families, good, hard-working Americans." The room quieted. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Obama continued, "Nearly 62% of Americans are struggling to keep up. Inflation isn't just a number on a chart. It's the reason parents skip dinner so their kids can eat. It's the reason families hold their breath every time a bill arrives." The audience listened closely. Some nodded. Some whispered softly to each other. Even those who didn't support him couldn't deny his words hit home. Obama's tone grew firmer. "But here's the thing," he said, "leadership isn't about blaming the last person in office or the next one coming in. Leadership is about standing up right now and saying, what can we do together to fix this?" A wave of applause filled the hall. Obama smiled faintly, took a small sip of water, and continued. He spoke about teamwork, about government accountability, about compassion. He didn't mention anyone by name, but everyone knew the shadow of current politics hung over his words. In the front row, Donald Trump sat motionless, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Obama. His jaw was tight. His expression didn't change. But that silence said more than words ever could. Beside him sat Barron, tall, serious, his phone resting face down on the table. He looked calm, but curious. This was one of those moments where history and legacy met in real time. Obama ended his speech with a line that drew quiet respect from the room. He said, "A great nation doesn't rise because one man wins. It rises when every man and woman stands together, even when it's hard." He paused, looked up, then added, "Leadership isn't about pointing fingers. It's about lifting hands." That was it. The audience clapped long and loud. Some stood again. Even people from the opposite side of politics couldn't help but applaud. Obama stepped back slightly, nodding in appreciation. The camera lights flickered as photographers captured the moment. The former president looking composed and reflective, the very picture of quiet confidence. But while the room celebrated the moment, a storm was quietly building. In the front row, President Trump leaned slightly toward his son. No one could hear what he said, but Barron smirked faintly just for a second. Trump's eyes stayed on Obama, and his expression hardened. He tapped his finger on the table as if waiting for his turn. He wasn't the kind of man to sit silently after hearing something like that, and everyone knew it. The host stepped back up to the microphone, smiling nervously again. "Thank you, President Obama," he said. "That was powerful." The applause died down slowly. The sound of the clapping faded, replaced by an uncomfortable stillness. And then, with the faintest edge in his voice, the host announced, "Next, we'll hear from President Donald J. Trump." Obama took a seat. Trump stood up, buttoned his jacket, and adjusted his tie. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of grin that said, "Now it's my turn." The audience waited. Cameras pointed at him. Reporters raised their pens. Trump leaned toward the microphone. The lights reflected off the podium as he cleared his throat and began to speak. His voice sharp, confident, unmistakable. And just like that, the mood in the room flipped. The applause was gone. The politeness had vanished. Something far more personal was about to begin. Because what started as a respectful event was about to turn into a heated showdown between two presidents and one son who had no idea how far things were about to go. The applause had just ended. People were still whispering about Obama's words, the compassion, the calm, the quiet confidence. But at the very front of the hall, one man wasn't clapping. President Donald Trump. He sat still, eyes locked on Obama, his jaw was tight, his face unreadable, but inside you could almost feel the storm building. He glanced to his right at Barron and leaned closer. The cameras couldn't catch what he whispered, but Barron gave a quick nod. Then Trump straightened his tie, adjusted his jacket, and stood up. The host's nervous voice came through the microphone. "Now, please welcome the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump." The applause this time was hesitant, polite, but cautious. Everyone knew what could happen when Trump had a microphone in his hand. He walked up to the podium slowly, soaking in the attention. Flash bulbs burst like lightning across the hall. His every step echoed with authority. Trump stood there for a moment, looking out over the audience. Then he smiled. That signature half-smirk, half-dare smile, and leaned into the microphone. "Well," he began, his tone laced with sarcasm, "that was quite a speech, wasn't it?" A few people chuckled nervously. Others just waited. They knew that tone. Trump continued, Barack talks a lot about unity, about togetherness, about how we should all carry the burden. Sounds nice, doesn't it?" He paused. His voice dropped slightly, growing sharper. But here's the truth. The problems people face today didn't just appear out of nowhere. They didn't start last year or even the year before. They started when he was in charge. The room went still. Trump wasn't easing into this. He was diving right into confrontation. He turned toward the crowd, pointing slightly for emphasis. People can't afford groceries. Gas prices are through the roof. Families are suffering. And you know who built that foundation? Obama. Gas rippled through the audience. Reporters began scribbling notes. Cameras zoomed in tight on Obama's face. Calm. Expressionless. Trump pressed on, his voice booming. "You talk about leadership, Barack, but leadership means taking responsibility, and you never did. You talk about helping people, but people are still hurting because of the mess you left behind." Some in the crowd clapped, others sat frozen, unsure if they were witnessing a speech or a verbal brawl. Obama didn't move. He didn't interrupt. He simply sat back, his hands folded, his face calm, almost too calm. Trump looked around, pacing slightly behind the podium. Inflation, unemployment, border chaos, all of it traces back to bad decisions. You talk about listening to people. I've been listening, and what they're saying is they're tired. He hit the last words hard, letting them hang in the air. The host shifted uncomfortably in his seat. A few people whispered, but Trump wasn't finished. He said, "when I came into office, I promised to fix what was broken. And despite all the resistance, despite the constant attacks, we did things differently. We told the truth even when people didn't like it." He turned his head slightly, glancing at Obama. "We didn't stand here pretending everything was fine." The words dripped with sarcasm. Obama's expression didn't change, but you could sense the weight of the moment. Every eye in the room moved between the two men, one calm, one fiery. Trump leaned closer to the microphone again. See, Brock likes to sound thoughtful, but talk is cheap. And while he talks, people struggle. While he talks, families lose homes. While he talks, America pays the price. The statement landed like a punch. A few in the audience clapped loudly. Some booed softly. The division in the room was visible, half standing with Trump's boldness, half uncomfortable with his directness. But Trump thrived on that tension. He fed off it. He smiled slightly and said, "You can give speeches all day. You can sound smooth. You can say the right words. But if you don't deliver results, those words mean nothing." The crowd reacted again, louder this time. Trump looked proud, confident. For a moment, it felt like he had taken control of the entire room, but one person wasn't moved at all. Obama sat quietly, still calm and collected. He looked at Trump, nodded once, and gave a faint knowing smile, the kind that said, "Go ahead. I've seen this before." That small smile changed the energy completely. The camera caught it and it spread across the big screen in the hall. The audience noticed. Trump noticed too. His smile faded. For a brief second, the power in the room shifted. The applause stopped. The whispers started again. Trump took a step back, glanced toward Barron, then back at the crowd, and then in one quick motion, he turned the microphone toward his son. "Barron," he said, "you've got something to say, don't you?" Barron looked surprised, almost unsure. But his father's stare told him this wasn't a question. It was a cue. Barron leaned forward, adjusted the microphone, and cleared his throat. The audience felt completely silent. Even the photographers stopped clicking. A few seconds passed. Long, heavy seconds. Then Barron spoke. His tone was calm, but cold, confident, but cutting. And in just 9 seconds, he said something that would completely change the direction of the entire event. But what came out of Barron Trump's mouth next wasn't just unexpected. It was the spark that would ignite the biggest confrontation of the night and leave both Trump and his son utterly speechless. For a few seconds, the room was frozen in silence. Every eye in that grand hall shifted toward one person, Barron Trump. He sat there at the edge of his seat, tall and composed. But behind that calm face, you could see the pressure. His father had just handed him the spotlight in front of the world. And now everyone waited to see what the youngest Trump would do. He leaned forward slightly, adjusted the microphone, and took a slow breath. The entire hall was quiet. No whispers, no phones, no movement. The silence was thick enough to feel. Then with a faint smile, Barron began to speak. "Well," I said, his tone calm, but laced with a hint of sarcasm. "I guess we all appreciate a good speech about unity and compassion, especially from someone who spent years dividing the country." A few people gasped. A few clapped nervously. Obama didn't move. He stayed seated, steady, eyes focused on Barron. Barron continued, his voice steadying as he went on. "My dad always says, leadership is about truth, and sometimes the truth isn't pretty. Sometimes it's about asking questions that others are too